Chapter 4 Festival.
A merchant Earl had never seen before stood at a stall, surrounded by a flock of young women. Earl heard him shout, "Just one drop of this elixir, and the man of your desire will fall hopelessly in love with you." In an oily, theatrical voice, he added, "Only 20 royal silver coins per flask." Earl pushed his way through the circle of giggling girls and cut in. "Only one drop? Then it must be incredibly potent." "Yes, indeed," the merchant said, scanning the crowd for the voice. When his eyes finally settled on Earl, he straightened his posture. "Certified mermaid tears, sir. Acquired by a trusted associate of mine from a coastal town in Corsa. And you are, good sir?" "My name is Earl, guild member." He pulled his brass compass from his coat and held it up just long enough for the merchant to get a clear look. The merchant's smile flattened. Around them, the girls quieted, their excitement dimming as they glanced between the stranger and Earl. Earl folded his arms. Interesting, because the guild's archives list exactly 0 verified cases of mermaids shedding tears. Or existing. A few of the girls snickered. The merchant cleared his throat. Well, you know how records can be, spotty in remote regions." "Right," Earl said dryly. "Then you won't mind if I take this to the guild for examination? We always appreciate new discoveries. You would be well compensated." The merchant's hand shot out to block him. It won't be necessary." Earl raised an eyebrow. "No? I thought they were genuine." Silence tightened the little circle around them. The merchant forced a strained smile. A slight exaggeration in the marketing, perhaps. Harmless, a trade secret." "So they're fake," Earl said plainly. The man deflated. "A harmless perfume mixture, sir. Nothing more." Earl stepped back, giving the girls room to leave if they wanted. "Then maybe advertise it honestly. Or pack up before the guards do it for you." The merchant was already sweeping the bottles off his table. "Sir, I was just trying to make a living," he pleaded. "I understand," Earl said. "That's why I didn't call the guards straight away." The merchant muttered a string of curses under his breath as Earl turned away from the stall, heading deeper into the square in search of an open table. Somewhere he could sit down, grab a plate of something warm from the cooking pits, and maybe a beer or two to dull the day's chaos. As Earl walked through the square, he spotted Jane and Jasper helping their mother prepare plates of roasted ox meat. He waved and smiled as he approached. "Looks like you two are busy." Jasper shot him a look, sweat dripping down his forehead, cheeks flushed, breath short. With a small edge of annoyance, he replied, "You think? We've been running around all day. Mom's worse than the slaveholders in Great Saal." Jane, despite looking just as exhausted, gave Earl a warm smile. "Do you want something to eat?" "I would love a plate," Earl said, returning the smile. "Where were you all day?" Jasper cut in. "Didn't you say you'd help us here if Master Leicester gave you the day off?" "Commander Barrow ordered me to follow him to a mysterious shipwreck," Earl said, lowering his voice. "I'll tell you more when we have more." "Jasper!" Mrs. Whitmore yelled from behind the stall. "Stop talking to everyone! People are hungry!" Jane leaned closer to Earl as she handed him a plate. "Mom promised we'd be off in 2 hours. You can tell us everything then." With a plate of grilled ox and steaming vegetables in hand, Earl found a free table near the edge of the square. He sank onto the bench, the noise of the festival washing over him in a warm, distant blur. For the first time since waking after the storm, he finally had a moment of stillness.
He cut off a generous piece of the ox and took a bite. The meat was incredible, crisped at the edges, still tender and juicy inside. A burst of unfamiliar flavor spread across his tongue. He paused. A new spice. Mrs. Whitmore must have used one of the rare seasonings the kingdom had begun importing recently. Something sharp, earthy, with a warm heat that lingered pleasantly on his tongue. Just as he realized he hadn't brought anything to drink, a cool shadow fell across the table. "Here you go, Earl," Jane said, setting a freshly drawn beer beside his plate. Before he could even get out a thank you, she wrapped her arms briefly around his shoulders from behind, then hurried back toward the food line to help her mother. Earl watched her slip back into the crowd, for a heartbeat longer than he meant to. When she disappeared behind a cluster of festival-goers, he exhaled and leaned back, letting the noise of the midsummer celebrations wash over him. Laughter, music, the smell of roasted meat and spiced cider, lanterns swaying overhead like drifting stars. He took a slow, deep breath and let himself sink into the moment. For a brief flicker in time, Earl forgot the shipwreck, forgot the unconscious girl with skin like his, forgot the storm that had nearly taken his life. Right now, there was only the warmth in his chest, the crisp bite of perfectly seasoned ox, the cool beer at his elbow, and the living pulse of the festival air around him. Earl felt an arm hook around his shoulders. "Finally free!" Jasper groaned. "That old witch had us working our bones off." "You'd better not be talking about our beloved mother," Jane said as she pulled out a chair and sat beside Earl. Earl looked up just as Jasper appeared, holding 2 beers. Jasper handed him one and shot his sister a glare. "You can defend her all you want, Jane, but she is exploiting us." Earl was already a little tipsy. The new beer in front of him didn't help. Still, he lifted it as the twins settled into their seats. "Cheers," Earl said. "Glad you two survived." "Cheers," they echoed, raising their mugs. Jasper wasted no time. He leaned in, lowering his voice like he was telling a ghost story. "So, tell us about this mysterious shipwreck of yours." Earl leaned in and lowered his voice. "I heard the commander telling his soldiers about a royal falcon he received. Something about the Golden Federation collapsing into anarchy. Something about the Crown Prince being killed and..." He swallowed hard. "And something about them killing every guild member they could find." "Guild members?" Jane whispered. "Why would they kill guild members?" "I don't know," Earl said, anger tightening his jaw. "But I want to know." "How horrible," Jane murmured, shaking her head. Jasper glanced at his sister, then back at Earl. "Well, guild members aren't universally loved. Even here in the kingdom, some people resent the guild." He lifted his mug and shrugged. "You hear a lot when you work at the tavern." "I work at the tavern too, you know," Jane said, rolling her eyes at her brother. She turned back to Earl. "Did Commander Barrow say who killed the guild members?" "No, he didn't. He just said the whole region has been unstable for a while." Earl took a breath, refocusing. "Right after that, we got word of the shipwreck." "Oh, right, the shipwreck," Jasper said, laughing aloud. "The ship looked strange to us," Earl continued, his excitement building again. "It didn't seem built for the open ocean, but that's clearly where it came from. There's nothing north of us except open sea. At least, nothing we know of." He leaned forward. "And there was this girl who washed ashore. She was, well, she looked like me. Same skin color, similar features." "Girl?" Jane repeated. "Some girl who looks like you survived the shipwreck?" Her tone shifted, subtle but unmistakable. "Yes," Earl said, nodding quickly. "Isn't that great?" "Great," Jane echoed. Her tone had shifted more than subtly now. "Yes, maybe I can finally learn where I come from," Earl said, unable to hide his hope. Maybe she knows something. "Your home is in Bray," Jasper said firmly. Earl nodded, but his voice softened. "Yes, Bray is my home. But I'm still curious where my parents came from, who they were, what kind of people they were." "I guess," Jasper said, finishing his beer with a shrug. "Were you able to find out more about this girl?" Jane asked, her tone a little too casual. "No, she was unconscious when we found her," Earl said. "We brought her up to the keep to rest." "So she'll stay with you guys? In the keep?" Jane pressed, leaning in. Yes, I think so. She'll be in the hospital wing with Mrs. Lockwood," Earl replied, stumbling slightly over his words. Jane didn't blink. "And did you find any other survivors? Like men?" she continued, interrogation mode fully engaged. "No, only women and children," Earl answered truthfully. Jane scoffed and crossed her arms. "How convenient." "All right," Jasper muttered, rolling his eyes at both of them as he stood up. "Time for a second round." As the night wore on, the three of them drifted deeper into the midsummer festivities. They laughed, drank, and teased one another, young adults pretending for a few precious hours that life would always stay this simple. Music echoed through the square, torches flickered in the warm breeze, and for a brief moment, Earl felt as if nothing dark or strange had touched his day at all. But beneath the joy, a quiet weight lingered. None of them said it aloud, yet all three seemed to sense it. The unspoken truth that days like this might not last forever. Still, they held on to the night as long as they could. By the time they finally made it home, it was late. The festival was winding down, lanterns burning low, and the last scattered laughter fading into the crooked streets of Bray. Earl barely remembered the walk to his room. His head was warm with drink, his legs heavy from the long night, and the aches from yesterday's injuries still dragging at his body. By the time he reached his bed, he could feel every bruise, every sore muscle, from the storm, from the wreck, from the hours spent riding. The moment the soft, lingering warmth of the mattress met his weight, he didn't even bother pulling off his boots. Sleep swallowed him instantly. "Earl, wake up! Wake up, boy!" Master Leicester's voice cracked through the darkness like a whip. Earl jolted, only to find the master gripping his shoulders, shaking him hard enough to rattle his skull. "Wake up, Earl. Get dressed. We're going to Central City." "What?" Earl blinked, still half buried in sleep. He sat up too fast, instantly regretting it. My head. Gods." His mouth felt like sand. "What time is it? And why are you waking me up again?" "Who told you to get drunk?" Leicester snapped. "I said get ready. We leave in half an hour. We're escorting the mysterious castaway directly to the king, per direct order from the Baron. And afterward, I'm taking you to the guild headquarters on the Island of Men." Earl stared at him, eyes unfocused. We're going to Central City?" he half asked, half coughed. Leicester threw his hands up. "How many times must I repeat myself, boy? Get your composure back, get dressed, and meet me at the stables in half an hour." And just like that, he swept out of the room with the cold precision of a man who had already moved on to the next task, leaving Earl blinking in the quiet he left behind. Earl sat frozen on the edge of his bed, hair sticking in every direction, head pounding, and heart suddenly racing. Central City, the king, the castaway girl, the Island of Men. He swallowed hard. He was awake now. He glanced out the window. It was still dark. Judging by the moon's position, the sun wouldn't rise for another 2 hours. He must have slept only 4 hours at most, but the lack of rest didn't dampen his excitement one bit. He had gone on week-long excursions before, but never outside the Northern Territory. This journey, though, this one could take months. He was going to see Central City. The thought alone sent a thrill rising through him. Unsure what he needed for a journey of such length, he simply threw everything he could think of into his backpack. Clothes, notebooks, tools, spare charcoal, a knife, whatever he could reach. Earl arrived at the stables 10 minutes early. Commander Barrow and a soldier were already waiting when he stepped inside. "Good morning, Earl," Barrow said, crossing his arms. "You're up earlier than I expected, considering how much ale you stuffed into yourself last night." "Good morning, Commander Barrow," Earl replied. "Will you be joining us on the journey?" Barrow let out a short, rough laugh. "Me? No, lad. My duties lie here in Bray. Someone's got to keep this place from falling apart." He jerked his thumb toward the soldier beside him. "Philip here'll be escorting you lot." Earl looked at the soldier, really looked, and his mouth fell open. It was the same guard who had rudely called him boy at the barracks yesterday. "Why him?" Earl asked, unable to hide the plea in his voice. Philip shifted uncomfortably, stepping from one foot to the other, clearly hoping no one would bring that up. Barrow snorted. "Because he's the best of his class, that's why. Fastest musket reloader I've ever seen, and sharp as a nail when he keeps his mouth shut. And he's the only one here on Bray." He jabbed a thumb at Philip without looking at him. "Don't worry, he'll do his job. Ain't that right, lad?" Philip straightened immediately. "Yes, Commander." Before Earl could object further, he heard footsteps approaching from behind. All 3 men turned as Master Leicester appeared, followed by 3 guards struggling to control the chained castaway. She twisted and shoved against them, forcing the men to brace their weight to avoid hurting her. Even with a bit gag in her mouth, she still growled and hissed through it, unyielding, fierce, very much awake. Barrow let out a rough laugh. "You've got yourself some hard-to-keep cargo there, Master." Earl stepped closer. "How are we going to make sure she stays with us throughout the journey?" Philip rose, picked up his musket, and walked toward her. He stopped directly in front of the girl, meeting her eyes with an unblinking stare. Then he jabbed the stock of the musket into her ribs, not hard enough to break anything, but sharp enough to make his point. "If you flee," he said quietly, "I'll catch you, and you won't like what happens after." The girl's eyes narrowed, bright and burning, but she stopped struggling. "You see? Just a little discipline and she behaves," Philip proclaimed with a dirty grin. Earl and Master Leicester exchanged a glance. "We don't think she even speaks our language," Leicester said carefully. "And, quite frankly, none of the ones I know." "The language I spoke to her is spoken all over the world," Philip replied, lifting his chin as if he'd said something clever. "That's enough now, Philip," Barrow cut in, his voice low and sharp. "Why don't you help Grandmaster Leicester sit that brat up and tie her on your horse?" Philip flinched ever so slightly, Barrow's reminder of Leicester's rank landing squarely. He had clearly forgotten, for a moment, that he was speaking to a man equivalent to a colonel. "No," Leicester said, raising a hand. "Tie her to my horse. I weigh the least, and it's better for the horses that way." They tied the girl to Master Leicester's horse. Once everyone was mounted, Barrow looked at Philip. "Philip, I expect a falcon from you the moment you reach River Cross. Behave, and keep the guild's men safe." "Yes, sir. You won't be disappointed," Philip replied. "Commander Barrow," Earl called before they rode out of sight and hearing. "Can you leave a message for Jane and Jasper? Tell them I couldn't say goodbye, but I'll send falcons whenever I get the chance." "I will, Earl. Don't worry," Barrow said, trying to comfort him. "They'll understand." Earl left with a faint smile. As Earl rode through the city gates once more, he thought of the twins, Mrs. Whitmore, Commander Barrow, and all the other people he had known all his life. He wasn't sure when he would see them again. Even though the kingdom had made substantial advancements in infrastructure, travel still demanded time. What once took months, sometimes years, could now be done in weeks. It was the same horseback riding as centuries ago, but the roads were now secure, maintained, and patrolled. That was not true of the far northern corners of the kingdom, nor of Shartwood Forest, the vast woodland that cut Bray off from the rest of the realm, and the reason the town felt so secluded. Shartwood was a dark, sprawling forest where the kingdom's order struggled to take hold, its roads few and its patrols thin, allowing outlaw bands to linger in the spaces the king had not yet fully reached. It was the second largest forest in the kingdom, surpassed only by the king's forest, yet far more remote and untamed. Chapter 5. The sun was already high as they rode beneath the forest canopy, when Earl said, "I'm thirsty. Didn't we bring anything to drink? Or eat?" "You were supposed to bring your own rations," Philip replied. "I brought mine, and I'm not going thirsty because you are hungover this morning." Master Leicester glanced at Earl. "You can have some of mine, but once we reach Driftwood, you'll buy your own. From your own coin." "I brought food for only myself and the girl," Leicester added. "I didn't think you'd forget yours, given your usual dedication to eating." "She hasn't been eating all morning," Earl said, his hand resting briefly on his stomach. "Maybe she doesn't like our food. I bet she wouldn't mind if you shared some of hers." "You're right," Leicester said. "She hasn't been doing much of anything. She isn't even fighting, almost as if she's accepted her fate." "My warning earlier must have had quite an effect," Philip said with a quiet chuckle. "Maybe," Leicester replied. "Or maybe not. Either way, I'm glad we're making progress and don't have to fight her all the way to Central City." Crack. "Quiet," Philip hissed. "Did you hear that?" The three men scanned the forest in silence. "Yes," Leicester said at last, doubtful. "But I don't see anything." "Probably just a hog," Philip said. "Let's hope it's not one of those outlaw bands. They've been getting bolder." "Really?" Earl asked. "I thought outlaws stayed hidden, only moving at night when it's harder to track them." "The more the kingdom modernizes, the less room they have to hide," Leicester said. "Bray keeps expanding, and Driftwood has been cutting back the forest from the other side for decades. The outlaws feel cornered." "Cornered?" Philip scoffed. "You almost sound like you're on their side." "I most certainly am not," Leicester said calmly. "But understanding your enemy matters. Empathy can be useful, even in war." Philip rolled his eyes. "Why are there outlaws at all?" Earl asked, ignoring him. "Why doesn't the king just send soldiers into the forest and clear it out?" Leicester turned to Earl, his voice steady as the horses picked their way between the trees. "It isn't that simple. First, there would be heavy losses.
The king has better resources, but they know the forest far better than we do. Second, the flow of new outlaws never truly stops. Even if most were caught, they would be replaced within half a decade, driven there faster by the very pressure meant to remove them. "Flow?" Earl asked, genuinely puzzled as his horse stepped over a thick root in the path. "Why would there be more and more? Wouldn't the king want to stop the rise of bandits and outlaws?" "Of course he would," Leicester said, guiding his mount around a low-hanging branch. "But if those people were inclined to listen to the king, they wouldn't be outlaws to begin with." Leicester studied Earl for a moment, his voice softening. "And you'll come to see this soon enough. Resentment is growing across the world, even here, within the kingdom itself." "You almost sound treasonous," Philip said, scanning the trees as they rode. "Good thing the Baron isn't here to hear you." "The Baron?" Leicester scoffed quietly. "That fool knows exactly how I think. I watched him grow up." He nudged his horse forward. "He might be a better ruler now if he'd listened more back then." Philip's ears reddened. He turned back to the trees, scanning the forest as if hoping no one had noticed, and muttered, "I can't wait to get out of this damned forest and have a proper brew in driftwood." "Yes," Leicester said. "Let's keep pushing. I have no desire to spend a night here either." He glanced ahead down the road. "Bray and Driftwood are a hard day's ride at a good pace. We've already covered much of it, but I'd rather not test our luck by slowing now." The group continued at a steady trot, the sound of hooves muffled by the forest floor. Master Leicester hummed softly, steering his horse along the narrow trail. The shadows stretched longer between the trees, the forest oddly still. The girl shifted uneasily, tugging against her bindings. "Hold," Leicester said, lifting a hand. He said it first to the group, then to the girl as she began to struggle. "Maybe she needs to relieve herself," Philip said, casting her a suggestive glance. "Perhaps," Leicester replied. "Let's stop here for a moment and give the horses a rest." "Someone needs to watch her," Philip said, hopeful. Leicester looked from Philip to Earl and back again. "Yes," he said calmly, "and neither of you will be doing so." "What if she overpowers you, old man?" Philip shot back. Leicester extended his hand. "Then you'll give me your loaded musket. She'll know better than to run with a barrel pointed at her. Now, both of you, tend to the horses." He dismounted and helped the girl down from the saddle and walked her, at gunpoint, around a tree.
Oddly, she stopped resisting at a very convenient moment, Earl thought, just as he heard Master Leicester shout for help. Earl and Philip exchanged a glance and sprinted toward the sound. As Earl reached the clearing, he saw the girl thrashing violently, fighting her shackles with renewed strength. "What happened?" Philip demanded. "I don't know," Leicester said. "She went wild all of a sudden." There was fear in the girl's eyes. A sharp whistle cut the air beside Earl's ear. He turned just in time to see an arrow buried in the girl's shoulder. Another hissed past a heartbeat later, barely missing her head. A third followed, striking her thigh. Master Leicester shoved the girl to the ground, dragging her behind him to get her under cover. Philip snatched back his musket. Earl turned toward him, but Philip was already sprinting in the direction the arrows had come from. Earl hesitated. Protect Master Leicester and the girl, or follow Philip? "Go!" Leicester barked. "Run after them! If we don't strike back, they'll finish us!" Earl glanced once more toward the girl, then took off after Philip. He reached him just in time to hear a wet gurgle, followed by a soft cry that faded into nothing. Philip stood over a fallen man. He looked to be in his 50s, gaunt and hollow-eyed, his frame so thin it bordered on malnourished. All of a sudden, Earl saw something move beneath the man's chin. Realization struck a heartbeat later. Philip had driven his saber up through the man's jaw. As he pulled it free, blood poured out in a dark rush. "Grab his bow and arrows, and his dagger," Philip whispered sharply.
Stay low. There are more. Follow me.
Earl stepped closer to the dead man. He had seen corpses before, but he had never watched a man die. And not like this. He stared into the man's empty eyes and wondered distantly if someone would miss him. He swallowed hard, knowing he would never forget this moment. "Hurry!" Philip hissed, already moving on. They crouched in the brush until a soft cough broke the silence. Earl looked at Philip, who pressed a finger to his lips, then gestured for Earl to stay put. Philip slipped forward, inch by inch. He turned just in time to see a third bandit drawing his bow, aiming straight at Philip. Earl froze. Adrenaline surged. Without thinking, he snatched up the stolen bow. He closed one eye, just as he had seen others do, fitted an arrow, and pulled back with all his strength. The bow resisted him. He held for a heartbeat and released. The arrow fell short, skidding into the forest floor well before its mark. Not dangerous, but close enough for the bandit to notice Earl. The bandit turned, looking first at the arrow in front of him, and then his eyes locked onto Earl's. He almost looked amused as he shifted his aim. "Damn," Earl breathed. There was nowhere to run. At this distance, there was no time. He was about to shut his eyes when the bandit suddenly pitched forward. Earl stared, confused, then saw Philip standing over him, musket raised like a club. He must have struck him from behind. Philip brought the weapon up again, leveling it at the bandit's head. "Wait!" Earl shouted. "He doesn't deserve mercy," Philip said, his voice tight with hate. "He doesn't deserve to live." "Do what you must," Earl said quickly. "But let me ask him why they attacked us." Philip hesitated, jaw clenched. 30 seconds, he said at last. "Then we get back to the old fool and the girl." Earl stepped forward and crouched beside the bandit. He was thin and old as well, his bones pressing sharply against his skin. "Why did you attack us?" Earl asked softly. "We didn't do anything to you. We're only trying to reach Driftwood." The bandit looked at him with disgust. "Your guild," he said. "You and that old man. You've caused so much misery in this world that killing you would be mercy to the rest of us." He spat in Earl's face. Bang! Birds burst from the trees as the gunshot echoed through the forest. Blood and bone shattered across the forest floor as Philip fired his musket into the bandit's head at point-blank range.
30 seconds are over, Philip said. "We need to move. The girl needs immediate attention, and there may be more coming."
He grabbed Earl by the shoulders. Earl's ears rang. His thoughts lagged behind the moment. The image of the dead man burned itself into his mind. He was in shock. What had just happened? And the third bandit? Had Philip killed him too? They reached the clearing where the girl lay wounded. Master Leicester was already tending to her, pressing a bandage tight around her thigh. He looked up as the two young men approached. "You made it," Leicester said, relief breaking through his voice. "What happened? Did you get them?" "I found 3 bandits," Philip said. "I took care of all of them. But we still need to move. There may be more coming." Master Leicester nodded grimly. "That gunshot will have alerted anyone nearby.
and the girl needs a proper doctor, urgently." Earl had been quiet since they returned. He leaned against a tree. Then, without warning, a wave of nausea hit him. He doubled over and vomited onto the forest floor. "Good thing I didn't give you any of my rations," Philip said mockingly, glancing back at the sounds Earl was making. Earl straightened and wiped the remains from his mouth. Without a word, he walked to his horse. Once mounted, he finally said, "Let's hurry." Still tied, the girl followed Master Leicester horse, calmer now, at least for the moment. Master Leicester and Philip fell in behind Earl at a fast trot. The group rode on in silence. Philip and Master Leicester listened to the forest, eyes moving constantly, scanning for any sign of pursuit. Earl was lost in his thoughts. He couldn't shake the faces of the two men he had seen die, their gaunt features, their sickly thinness. What had the bandit meant when he said the guild was responsible for so much misery? Had they left people behind? Mothers, wives, children waiting for fathers who would never return? Would those children grow up never knowing what had happened to their fathers? And why did Philip seem so untouched by it all? As if he had lived through moments like this 100 times before. Earl glanced at him. Philip rode ahead, posture steady, eyes fixed on the trees. Dark blood still stained the shaft of his saber. A shower of nausea overwent Earl again as he saw the bloodstains. He swallowed hard to not vomit again, but he was unsuccessful in his effort. He vomited whatever he had left in his stomach from yesterday's fest. He cursed and swore himself to not be this weak next time. He felt behind him, where he had strapped the bow earlier without thinking. He will train with the bow, so he won't be so useless next time. Earl glanced at Master Leicester and the girl. Blood was seeping through the bandage around her thigh, dripping steadily onto the saddle. The girl swayed back and forth, struggling to keep her balance. Master Leicester kept one hand on her, trying to steady her. She looked barely conscious, fighting to stay awake. "Master!" Earl shouted over the pounding of hooves, pointing at her leg. "She's losing a lot of blood." "Damn," Leicester said. "They must have hit an artery. We need to hurry, or she'll bleed to death." "How much longer?" Earl asked. 2 more hours, if we keep this pace." "Will she make it?" Leicester hesitated. "If they ruptured the femoral artery," he said quietly, "I'm afraid even a seasoned doctor might not be able to save her." Earl swallowed and looked at the girl again. How ironic, he thought. The first real chance he had to learn anything about himself. And she might die, taking that chance with her. Night had fallen by the time they reached a wide clearing. "We're almost there," Master Leicester said. "This is the edge of the forest. We're already in the territory of the lumber company." Earl looked around. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of tree stumps jutted from the ground, pale and raw in the dark. "So many dead trees," Earl said. "How are we not running out of forest? How long have they been felling trees here?" "Driftwood has existed for a few hundred years," Master Leicester replied. "But the rapid deforestation of Chartwood only began about 10 years ago." He paused. "Driftwood has grown quickly in that time. Unfortunately, it hasn't attracted the best men the kingdom has to offer. Many who came had few other options, so they went to work for the lumber company." "What guild oversees the logging and the lumber company?" Earl asked, genuinely interested. He had never questioned which guild the lumber trade belonged to. "Carpenters?" he guessed.
"No," Leicester said. "There is no guild oversight. The company is backed directly by the coin lenders and by the king. So the men felling the trees aren't part of any guild?" Earl asked, startled.
No, Earl, Leicester said. Most of them have no training, no qualifications, and few choices. Some come because they have nowhere else to go. Others because they're running from something, prison, debts, or worse. It's unregulated work with no protection or rights. For many, the alternatives are just as grim. As Leicester finished, Earl caught sight of lights flickering in the distance. Look, this must be driftwood. I'm afraid not, Leicester said. That's a military post. Driftwood lies beyond it. The girl needs the best care available, and that means the base infirmary, not driftwood, wedged between taverns and brothels. Halt! Who seeks entry to the Driftwood military post? A short, middle-aged man shouted as the group approached. My name is Philip, he called back. I'm escorting Grandmaster Leicester of the Guild. Philip raised his voice, trying to sound important. The guard's gaze flicked to the girl, then to Leicester. He straightened and corrected his salute. This girl needs immediate medical attention, Leicester said, gesturing toward her. She showed no sign of response. Now, Leicester barked. Yes, sir, the guard stammered. He spun and shouted over his shoulder. Theodore, Almore, get over here. Escort them to the infirmary and fetch the lead physician. A guild grand master is present. He hesitated, then added louder. And send word to the commander as well. Two large men came around the wall. The larger of the two strode to the girl and lifted her over his shoulder, while the other took charge of the horses once the group dismounted. They followed the man carrying the girl through the gate and into the military post. The post looked nothing like the caserne in Bray. It was far larger, with many more people moving about. Earl glanced around as they crossed the open encampment. Soldiers drank openly, played cards, and scuffled among themselves. It was far rowdier than anything he was used to in Bray. They reached a large tent and went inside. Earl saw several older men coughing on field beds along the sides. One man lay apart from the others, his leg freshly amputated and wrapped in thick bandages. The large soldier lowered the girl onto an empty field bed. The girl's safe, Philip said. I'm heading to Driftwood. Food, drink, and comforts best paid for by the hour. Master Leicester glanced at Philip, then surveyed the tent. Taking in that she was the only woman among a camp of drunken men, he said, Earl and I will remain here. We'll keep an eye on her. Earl heard movement behind him. He turned to see an old man in a stained white coat entering the tent. His hair and beard were gray, his face lined and weary, as though life had worn him down piece by piece. You must be Grandmaster Leicester of the Guild, the man said, studying him. The guards told me you brought in an injured girl. Yes, Leicester replied. To both. She was struck by 2 arrows, he continued. One in the right shoulder, the other in the left thigh. Arrows, the physician repeated, raising an eyebrow. Arrows, Leicester confirmed. We were ambushed by bandits on the road between Bray and Driftwood. Attacked in daylight, the physician said thoughtfully. That might explain why they didn't use a musket. Can we please focus on the girl who's bleeding out? Leicester said, fixing the physician with a steady look. I believe one of the arrows may have severed a major artery. Yes, sorry, sir, the physician said quickly. He glanced around, noticing how many eyes were fixed on them. Let's move her to another tent, somewhere more private. The large men lifted the girl again and carried her into an adjoining tent, one that appeared to connect directly to the physician's quarters. Once she was laid down, Leicester turned to Philip. You're still here. I thought you were eager to enjoy yourself in town. Philip flushed. I need to know where to find you tomorrow. I can't afford to lose you. Commander Barrow would hang me himself." "You three may sleep in my quarters," the gray-haired man said, gesturing toward the girl, then to Leicester and Earl. "Perfect," Leicester said at once. He looked back to Philip. "We'll remain here until the girl recovers." Philip forced a crooked smile. "Perfect," he echoed, then turned and left the tent.
Chapter 6. Earl woke to the sound of a man screaming in pain somewhere beyond the large tent adjoining Dr. Barstow's quarters. For a brief moment, as he opened his eyes, he forgot where he was. Then it came back to him, the military post outside Driftwood. He turned his head toward the girl lying on the triage bed nearby. Dr. Barstow had spent hours the night before stitching her wounds, and so he and Master Leicester had remained in the tent, keeping watch over her through the night. Even though Earl had slept on the floor, with only his robes for warmth and far from the comfort of his own bed, exhaustion had claimed him as he ate the food Philip had brought. Dr. Barstow said the bleeding had been stopped, and that if no infection set in and no other complications followed, she should be able to continue the journey in a week or so. Earl turned toward where he thought Master Leicester would be, but he wasn't there. He looked again. The tent was empty. He was alone with the girl. Earl assumed Philip had stayed in Driftwood, but he had expected Leicester to remain. Leaving him here with an unconscious stranger felt wrong. His stomach growled. Earl touched his belly. He was hungry. He glanced at the girl, then at the tent entrance. No guards, no physician, no one else around. He wondered if he could leave her alone for a moment, just long enough to find breakfast. By the time the thought finished forming, he was already on his way out of the doctor's quarters. Outside, he found his master speaking with Dr. Barstow. "We have to protect the girl at all costs," Leicester was saying. "There's no telling what insight she can—" He broke off as he noticed Earl. "You're awake." Earl looked from one man to the other. "What were you talking about?" "Nothing," Leicester said sharply. "Only that we must be more careful." He shifted the subject at once. "Are you hungry, boy?" "Yes," Earl said. "I was just going to find some breakfast." Leicester allowed himself a small smile. "Then go into town and look around. You'll need proper rations and better gear for the road before we continue on to the capital." Again, Earl looked from one man to the other. Both avoided his gaze and shrugged. There was no point arguing. He was leaving anyway, and now he knew his master would remain behind to watch over the girl. As Earl made his way out of the military post and toward the adjoining town of Driftwood, his thoughts churned. Protect her at all costs. Why would Leicester say that? What had he been discussing with a physician he barely knew, yet wouldn't share with him? Earl assumed the girl must be important enough for them to escort her personally to the capital. But he hadn't thought of her as a target. Not until now. He reached a wide open field where the trees had already been stripped away. Men were walking toward the forest line to begin their work. A dozen heavy carts, each pulled by oxen, creaked under the weight of freshly cut logs, hauling them toward Driftwood. There were easily 100 men already at work, spread across the field. Earl followed the wagons as they rolled into town. Driftwood had no true city wall, only a rough line of wooden poles set into the ground, more suggestion than defense. Most of the houses were built of wood, hastily raised and poorly kept.
Only a few structures near the town's center were made of stone. Above them all rose a large church, its tower looming over the settlement. The first thing Earl decided was to find a coin lender. The Coin Lenders Guild kept a bank in nearly every city, town, and village in the kingdom. Some claimed it was the second most powerful guild of all, after the Royal Guild of Advancing Wisdom, of course. More importantly, their offices were linked by a fast and reliable courier network. Earl could withdraw the gold he had deposited in Bray here in Driftwood, officially and without trouble. The bank on Bray is at the city center, so he figured it would be the same here. Walking through the streets, Earl noticed how tense he had become. Everything in Driftwood felt grimy and unsafe. The streets were muddy, with open gutters along the sides, choked with human waste. He saw women emptying the night's filth from their windows straight into the road below. The stench was so foul it turned his stomach, killing what little appetite he had left. Despite the filth, there were quite a bit of people roaming. Why would anyone choose to live like this? As he drew closer to the town's center, things began to change. The streets grew firmer underfoot, the mud thinning out. There was more brick, less rot. He found the bank and walked toward it firmly. A woman stood near the entrance, selling food from a small basket. "Care for a meat pie?" she called, stepping into his path. "Fresh and hot." No, Earl began. "Get out of here," a bank clerk snapped as he stormed outside. "This is bank property. Take your rat meat elsewhere." He shoved the woman back from the doorway.
"It's horse meat, sir," she said quickly, still forcing a smile as she glanced at Earl. "Shut your mouth and leave," the man said, pushing her to the ground, "before I call the military." At the word military, the woman began to plead. "Please, sir, that won't be necessary." She picked herself up. Though her smile remained, Earl caught the deep sadness in her eyes. He watched her for a moment as she limped away down the street. "Do you need a written invitation, boy?" the clerk sneered. "Or would you rather join that miserable woman?" Earl turned back to him. The man was old and heavyset, his face flushed and smug. "No, I'm here on guild business. I need to withdraw some coin," Earl said, drawing his compass from beneath his cloak. "Ah, the Royal Guild of Advancing Wisdom," the clerk said, his voice shifting into a practiced smile. "What brings us the pleasure of such an extraordinary visit?" As they entered the bank, Earl replied flatly, "As I said, guild business." "Of course," the clerk said. "May I ask which account you wish to withdraw from, fellow?" Earl met his gaze, irritation flickering. "I'm not a fellow, at least not yet. My name is Earl." He handed over the compass and his passbook. "I wish to withdraw 100 silver coins." The clerk seemed surprised at the amount, but he kept silent as he counted the coin. "Here you go, Earl from the guild," he said, looking deep into Earl's eyes. "Better be careful with that amount of coin here. Some don't see that amount all their lives. People kill for a lot less." "Thank you, sir," Earl said, his tone still dry. He disliked the clerk intensely and wanted out of the place as quickly as possible. "Have a pleasant day," he added, just as flat, before closing the door behind him. Outside the bank, he drew a deep breath and shook himself. That was unpleasant, he thought. Ding dong, ding dong. Earl flinched at the sudden sound. The church bells were ringing.
Though the church stood on the far side of the town center, he could already make out a large crowd gathering in front of it. He noticed the woman the clerk had pushed to the ground earlier, hurrying toward the church. "Wait! Wait!" he called after her. After several calls, she finally turned. The moment she recognized him, her gaze dropped to the ground. "I already said I'm sorry, sir. Please," she began, her voice slipping back into pleading. "No, ma'am," Earl said gently. He offered her a small smile. "I wanted to ask how much you're selling your meat pies for." The woman blinked, clearly confused. Sir?" she asked, unsure she'd heard him right. She wasn't old, Earl noticed, but life had worn her hard. He guessed she was in her late 30s, perhaps early 40s. "I'd like to buy a pie," Earl said, keeping his voice warm. "I just need to know what I owe you." Still uncertain, she hesitated. 20 copper coins, sir." Earl stepped a little closer. "In that case, please, I'll take a pie." Still half expecting a trick, she reached into her basket and handed him one of the wrapped cakes. "Here you are, sir," she said softly, finally meeting his eyes. Earl smiled as he took it. "Here," he said, pressing a silver coin into her hand. "You can keep the rest, ma'am." Her eyes widened. She pushed the coin back toward him at once. "Sir, that's too much," she said, fear creeping into her voice. "I'm only selling meat pies. I have a husband, sir, please." Earl blushed. "No, nothing like that. I don't have the right change, and I simply felt bad about how that clerk treated you." He reached out and gave her a light pat on the shoulder. She flinched at his touch. "I'm sorry," Earl said at once. "I didn't mean to." "No, it's all right," the woman said quickly. "I should apologize for my mistrust. People around here aren't usually generous, especially not to the likes of me." She smiled, and for a moment it seemed as though decades fell away from her face. Earl returned her smile. "I never introduced myself. My name is Earl, guild member. What's your name, ma'am?" The woman's eyes widened at the word guild. "People here in Driftwood call me Hannah," she said. "Nice to meet you, Hannah," Earl said. "Would you mind telling me a bit more about Driftwood, if I'm not interrupting your work?" Hannah glanced down at the silver coin in her hand, then let out a small laugh. "Earl, you just paid me a full day's wages. On a good day," she said. "I'm more than happy to answer whatever you'd like to know about this God-forsaken town." Earl paused. "You only sell about 5 pies a day?" he asked, genuinely surprised. Hannah's expression darkened at once. "Yes, Earl. No one wants my pies. Sometimes I sell a few late at night to drunken men, but it's dangerous here for a woman after dark with so many of them about." Her shoulders sagged. She looked defeated. "I'm sorry," Earl said quickly. "I didn't mean to upset you." She looked at him, then managed a small smile. "I know. I'm just not used to people being interested in our troubles."
She hesitated, then went on. "I'm trying to sell enough to help pay for my husband's medicine. He was injured a few months ago, lifting a log too heavy for him. He hasn't been able to work since." Her voice softened. "But as you can see, I barely make enough to feed him and our children." Earl was silent for a moment, then asked, "The company won't help pay for your husband's injury?" Hannah laughed, short and bitter. "Help?" she said. "The company won't give us a single copper.
They care only for profit.
But that goes against the king's law, Earl said. Any guild or affiliated company is required to compensate workers injured on the job. Hannah laughed again, louder this time. First, my husband isn't in a guild. And second, the company answers directly to the crown. Her smile faded. The king knows. This is how it's meant to be. Earl looked troubled. How does that make any sense? Why would the king go against his own laws? Hannah met his gaze. I thought people from the guild were meant to be clever, she said bluntly. You seem to lack a fair bit of common sense. Earl blushed. At once, Hannah did as well. I'm sorry, she said quickly. That wasn't my place, to speak that way to a guild member. Earl shook his head. No, you spoke no lies, he said. I'm still young, and I haven't left Bray often. He hesitated, then asked, How old are your children? Can they help? I have a 6-year-old, Hannah said, and a boy of 13. Her voice tightened. The older one wants to join the company to help pay our debts, but I'm doing everything I can to keep him from that fate. The same fate that broke his father. Earl swallowed as they stood watching the gathering at the church. After a moment of silence, he said, There seems to be a great deal of poverty in Driftwood. Is that why the church draws so many people? Yes, Hannah said, some light returning to her eyes. For many of us, faith is the only thing holding us together. Judging by the bull's head symbol, Earl said, gesturing toward a statue beside the church, I assume this is a Sartim cult? Sartim was a relatively new faith, set in opposition to the older polytheistic traditions practiced across the continent's many kingdoms. She scoffed. A cult? That sounds rather judgmental. I didn't mean to offend you, Earl said quickly. That's simply how it was described in one of the guild's books. He hesitated, trying to soften his tone. I take it you're a devoted follower of the Sartim faith. Yes, Hannah said at once. Father Alistair teaches that if we place our trust in him, and in Sartim the Creator, we'll be guided through even the darkest times. Her eyes brightened. Can't you see it? I was on my way to the church when you stopped me, and you showed me more kindness than I've known in years. Just as Father Alistair said. Earl stared at her, unsettled by the certainty in her voice. Slowly, he said, But wasn't it my choice to stop you? Hannah smiled at him. You're still so young, my young guild member, she said gently. And since I'm finished for the day, I can still attend Mass. Her smile widened. You should come with me. I promise you'll understand better. And perhaps we can speak with Father Alistair afterward, if you choose to make it known that you're from the guild. Excitement crept into her voice. Earl glanced around. They would be staying in Driftwood for several days, at least until the girl recovered enough to continue on to Rivercross. Very well, he said. I don't have anything pressing to attend to, and I admit, I'm curious to meet this Father Alistair. So it's settled, she said with a wide grin. She slipped her arm through Earl's as they began walking toward the church.